Hi, welcome to Crime Clueless. We're your hosts. I'm Jenna.
And I'm Laura.
Today, we're diving into a baffling case that began as a simple missing person report and slowly unraveled into this chilling family mystery. It's the story of Roger Fred, and he goes by Fred, so we'll call him Fred throughout, farmer. He was a 58-year-old Indianapolis man who vanished after doing one of his favorite things, going on a hunting trip in late 2019. For weeks, Fred's family received text messages from his phone saying he was fine, away on his hunting trip. Something about those texts didn't feel right. Fred's daughters felt in their guts that something was wrong. So get comfortable because this story builds slowly but surely. What initially seemed like a missing person case turned out to be something far more sinister.
So interesting already. This kind of reminds me of Dorothy's case where the guy's calling over and over again.
And yeah, the difference here is 2019 versus the 80s. So we have no calls,
Yeah.
only texts.
Yeah. Interesting.
Roger Fred Farmer Jr., like we said, we're going to call him Fred, was by all accounts a creature of habit. He was a retired auto worker and a disabled military veteran living on the west side of Indianapolis. He was 58 years old and he enjoyed the simple things in life, simple pleasures. He often went on hunting trips with his beloved dog, who he usually would never leave behind. And he was known to relax with friends over dollar beers at the local American Legion Hall. Family and friends describe him as dependable. He has never before now dropped off the radar without explanation.
So he seems like he's pretty regular routine type of guy. So
Mhm.
why was this different? What made it different in November of 2019?
Well, in late 2019, Fred told his friends and family that he was heading out for a hunting trip. That part's normal. Specifically, initially, he said it would be an out of state hunting excursion with some people, some friends of his. The names, though, no one in the family recognized, and they knew most of Fred's hunting buddies. Now, the exact date he left is a bit fuzzy. In reporting, it kind of varies from November 6th, 7th, 8th, all the way up through November 22nd. Mostly the reports say November 22nd, but we know it was early-ish November. November 22nd seems to be the last day that anyone ever reported seeing Fred. He left his home on Wandering Way, Indianapolis, and according to his son Jeremy, he departed for this hunting trip with his gear packed.
Was it normal for him to go on trips like that? Or was anything weird about this one or different?
Fred did take hunting trips regularly. That wasn't unusual. However, a couple of things about this trip immediately stuck out to especially his daughters and some close friends as strange. First, Fred left behind his dog, which was really out of character. He always took his dog on hunting trips. The dog was like his hunting buddy. Leaving him at home was a red flag. Second, he mentioned going with people, like we said, none of his close friends or family had ever heard of, which was also odd.
I can imagine his friends and family might have been concerned if they noticed those things, but initially, did anyone raise an alarm or did they just think he was going on a normal trip?
At first, no one panicked. He said he might be gone for a little while. Thanksgiving in 2019 was on November 28th. His daughters did think that he would be back and they would see him for Thanksgiving. But not only did they not see him, they didn't even hear from him. And they're thinking in their head, maybe his trip went longer, maybe he didn't have cell service, but it was odd to not have him back for Thanksgiving.
Had he talked about having Thanksgiving with them or did they just assume he would be back?
It kind of sounds like they just assumed that he would be back for Thanksgiving. I mean, 6 days feels like enough time for a camping hunting trip. In the days following his departure, his family had been getting some text messages. So they were reassured a little bit. One of his daughters, Christina, remembers getting a short text one morning that said something like, "Hey, I'm stuck in the woods. I'll be home in a week." Initially, that message made them feel like maybe he's delayed, but he's fine. Christina specifically said in some reporting that it made us all feel like he was okay. As December started and Christmas was approaching, Fred still wasn't back. The family was now getting worried. They weren't panicking because they were still getting text messages from Fred while he was gone. Little updates here and there. Like one time, he messaged that it had rained and his truck was stuck in the mud. He couldn't get it out. So his trip was taking longer than he thought. Because he was supposed to be with friends, it wasn't like he was asking for help getting his truck out of the mud. It was just, "Here's why I'm not home yet." And they thought he was with friends. Maybe he's just having the most epic trip ever. Fred continued to text them, telling him it was fine, enjoying the hunting, everything's good.
Did he ever call them or was it only text messages? And did the text messages seem like how he normally texted them?
Ooh, good question. Only texts, no calls from him. And that in itself wasn't too unusual. Fred often used text messaging to keep in touch. But Christmas came and went without Fred. He wasn't there. And again, he didn't call. This was the last, almost like the last straw, I guess, where his daughters were like, okay, we know something is going on. He wouldn't just miss Christmas. That's never been something that had happened. With the texts, they noticed that since he had gone on this trip, the texts were full of punctuation and even emojis. These were things that Fred never used when texting. He was known to use talk to text. So he would send messages that were just one long run on sentence without punctuation and never emojis. If you've gotten those, which I'm sure we all have, you almost have to read it out loud to yourself to figure out what's being said. So getting these well punctuated and really shorter texts with smiley faces was really out of character.
That is really suspicious. Did they ever try to call him?
I think they did. They never got a call back though. They,
Just always
from
leaving
when
voicemails.
he left, and his phone is still sending messages. You're still able to call it. So not dead, which is reassuring.
Yeah,
Uh,
especially after all that time being out in the
right,
woods and stuff.
right.
What did they do when they noticed these weird changes in his text messages?
It took a little bit. They kind of had to get multiple texts from him like this and then have a conversation about it. They were like, this really doesn't feel like dad is texting us. That's when it clicked for both of his daughters that maybe something really was wrong. Right after Christmas on December 27th, 2019, the family filed a missing report for Fred.
They waited until after Christmas to report him missing.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of like, we know he'll be back for that for sure. And then when he wasn't, it was full on panic mode.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And missing 2 holidays, missing Thanksgiving. He's
Yeah.
now been gone for well over a month.
Yeah.
The police took the missing person report and started investigating. Now, we're going to fast forward a few weeks into January 2020. Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, which is IMPD, Detective Larry Krasnoy gets a message from a friend of his. Not a close friend, a Facebook type friend that you keep in touch with. And this friend happened to also be a friend of Fred's. He had been getting texts from Fred as well. This mutual friend
Mhm.
of Detective Krasnoy and Fred knew that Krasnoy was a homicide detective. So he reached out, worried about Fred, and just asked if he could look into it. Can you find anything? I just feel like something isn't right here. Detective Krasnoy seems like a great guy. He decided to look into what was going on with this Fred guy for his friend. Right when he looks into it, he sees that there's already a missing person report on record, that one that was filed the end of December. Now, he's not in the missing person department, he's in homicide. So he has to be a little bit careful. He goes to his supervisors, tells them about this person that reached out to him and asked if he could talk to the assigned detective who's already working the case, see if she needs help, what's going on. And his supervisors agree. He reaches out to her and learns that she doesn't actually think this is a missing person case. Everything she's learned up to this point has her worried that it is more than that.
Yeah, for sure. It's really interesting that another friend, they were texting multiple people and they
Right?
noticed something was off too. That's really odd.
Really bold. That feels like you're not even trying to make it sound like
Yeah.
Fred. You're just letting it go as long as you can, I guess.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. How can I keep this going without suspicion? Well, they were being kind
Yeah.
of suspicious.
They didn't
Uh, they
really
didn't
spend a
realize
lot of
that, I
time
guess.
not being suspicious. Exactly.
Yes. They didn't even try to make it seem like his other text messages. Wouldn't you think you would look back and see how they text?
I
Not that I've thought
I
about
mean,
anything like that, but
yeah, totally.
right?
Yeah. And if it's someone who knows Fred, they should have been getting those texts from him. If it's someone who has no contact with him that has his phone, then maybe, but I don't know. It was
Maybe
interesting.
you got to start asking for pictures. Send me a selfie of you
Yeah.
on Christmas.
Evidence, right?
Yes. And if they say no, that's even more suspicious. So,
Yeah, agreed. Now, back to December. Christina didn't want to report her dad missing if he was really just on this month-long hunting trip. I can imagine that it is a hard call to make. It has to make it feel more real. Christina goes to Fred's house a little bit before Christmas to check in, see if there was anything at his house that made it feel like he had been home. Maybe he came home and left again, or anything that's out of the norm for Fred or his house, whatever. While she was at Fred's house, she noticed a lot of unopened mail. Christina starts looking for it. She's opening things here and there. In the process, she sees an envelope from the bank. She's like, oh, let me see if there are charges for gas or something on here. I can maybe get an idea of where he's been. When she looks at it, though, she realizes this isn't a bank statement. It's an alert that Fred's account is in the negative. This
oh,
is not normal at all. He's always been responsible with his money. He would never let his account be overdrawn. Christina hasn't seen her dad in several weeks. She hasn't talked to him on the phone, only these texts that are strange. Seeing the bank account, now he misses Christmas. So files a report on the 27th. On the 28th, a detective reaches out and Christina fills her in on all of these things that she's found so far. The detective was like, okay, we've got to find where Fred is. The first thing she does is check into Fred's finances. And she sees what Christina told her. It's in the negative. That's never happened before. She digs deeper and discovers a few other odd things. She sees a noticeable shift in spending starting in late November through December. Charges at places that Fred had never had a charge from before November.
where were they too? What kind of charges were they?
There were a lot of charges to bars and restaurants all over West Indianapolis.
This
And
whole time that he's supposed to be hunting?
exactly.
Okay.
On top of it being completely out of character spending at places he's never been to. I mean, like trendy bars, that's not who Fred is. He wouldn't go to those places. Also, like you said, in Indianapolis, when he's supposed to be far away on a hunting trip, it was also this uptick in spending, a lot more than Fred had ever spent in a month. Now, she continues to dig and she finds a charge to Lowe's on November 18th for $225.73. Now, technically, this is before they think Fred went missing. So she's like, Let me check it out and see if he's buying items on that day for a hunting trip. What was this large purchase for? Luckily for detectives, Lowe's actually had surveillance still of that day.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. We don't see that very often.
No, never. Detectives look at the footage, and the person making the purchase isn't Fred. It's someone a lot younger than him. This gives them pause. Okay, could Fred's bank card have been stolen before he went away? And maybe as he's getting ready to leave, he didn't notice that he didn't have it or someone else was using it.
Are they thinking now that there's a chance that the weird finances and Fred missing aren't connected? Like he had just lost his bank card, but still went hunting?
Totally possible. They decide to take the footage anyways and ask Fred's daughters on the off chance that, do you know who this is using Fred's credit cards? It's a good thing they did. Christina instantly recognized the man using Fred's card. It was her 35-year-old brother, Jeremy. According to an interview that Christina did with Crime Junkie, which has a great episode on this, and they also interviewed the detective, really interesting to listen to. They had a couple clips from it in their episode. Christina said, in that moment, looking at the footage, she knew in her gut that Jeremy had something to do with her dad's disappearance.
Their own brother. That would be such a hard realization. Did they have struggles with him? Had he had issues with them before? Did she have any kind of relationship with him? Why would she have that gut feeling about him?
Christina told the detective that she had a decent relationship with Jeremy, but he and their older sister, Trisha, didn't get along at all. Now, Fred had been married and divorced a few times in the past. These three all shared the same mom with Fred as the dad. And when those parents split, Christina and Trisha moved in with their mom, and Jeremy stayed with Fred. They didn't really get along that well. And Jeremy didn't have a criminal past. He had a few small charges, but nothing like he's in and out of prison or anything like that. He had struggled with substance use disorder in the past. The family also mentioned that Fred and Jeremy had some tension in their relationship, and that had been from back when he was just living with Fred and continued even to this day. But at the time, Jeremy was actually living with Fred in Fred's house.
Oh, so they were living together at this time. Had he moved out and then he moved back in?
Yeah. Yep.
How
He had
long?
only just since April,
Oh, okay.
6 months he'd been living there. Fred was trying to help Jeremy get on his feet. Earlier in 2019, they had decided to start a small landscaping business. Fred had even taken out a loan to buy a pickup truck for the business, with the understanding that Jeremy would make the payments on the truck. By November of 2019, Jeremy had fallen behind on those payments, and he also had taken his dad's cards in the past and spent money or taken money out of his account. I guess there was the understanding that if that happened again, you can't live here anymore. Like, I can't trust you living in my house. The money issue had caused serious friction between Fred and his son. Fred was upset with, like, specifically the truck. He told Jeremy that he would take the truck away since the payments weren't being made. I believe at this time, Jeremy didn't actually even have a driver's license because of a DUI.
Oh, okay.
So there's some other things going on there and in the last 6 months.
And so all of this, the money trouble and the truck stuff was all right before Fred disappeared. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. There were reports that the two had had a really big argument about money in early November, like November 6th or 7th. Friends later described their relationship as pretty strained, even leading up to that point. Fred kept trying to mend things between them, but it seemed like he was a little bit at a breaking point. The context of what was going on with the two of them, plus seeing Jeremy using Fred's bank cards, making purchases, made the whole family even more suspicious. In January of 2020, police obtained a warrant to search Fred's house. Now, when they did this, it was on January 13th, and the detective from the missing person case was still the lead on this case. Detective Krasnoy was like, "Can I come along and just see if there's anything I spot as a homicide detective that might
Yeah.
be different, especially where you think this probably isn't a missing person case?" And they were like, "Yeah, come with us." And I love to see the teamwork because that is not always the case.
Yeah. I was thinking too, since Jeremy was living with Fred, so they hadn't seen him either all this time.
They
And he
have.
wasn't at the house.
They've been seeing Jeremy.
Oh, he was there. Oh,
Yep.
okay.
He's just been hanging out as usual. Not really that
At
worried.
Fred's house.
Mhm. Watching his
Okay.
dog. Yeah.
Okay.
When they got to the house, they found cleaning supplies scattered all over, almost like someone had been cleaning vigorously. Part of the carpet in Jeremy's bedroom had been torn up and removed, and it didn't look like the normal replacement job. It looked like last minute rush. I'm going to rip this out, and I haven't bothered to replace it. They also noticed that Jeremy didn't appear to be staying in his own room anymore. He was staying in a different room, which is a little bit odd.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
That's never a good sign.
no,
Okay. I guess I didn't realize that Jeremy was living there when Christina went over to his house and all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
And
yeah. He had been
so he is
just,
getting the mail and just leaving it out for
it's
everyone
not
to see.
addressed to him. Yeah, I guess.
Weird.
Uh huh.
Guess we never said criminals were smart. Some are.
No,
I
some,
guess some are, but not
not
all.
that many, not all. As they're walking around, they notice the receipt for that shopping trip at Lowe's sitting on the table. If you've ever seen a Home Depot, a Lowe's receipt, usually it's just the serial numbers for what you buy and the prices and the total. It doesn't necessarily say they bought this, and this, right? Detective Krasnoy scooped that up to take it with him. They had the warrant. So he's like, "I'm going to go see what was actually purchased." Because even though they had the surveillance and could see it wasn't Fred making the purchase, they couldn't see everything that was being bought on the
Oh,
surveillance.
okay. Did they find any other evidence in the house?
Nothing that has been publicly put out there. After this search, plus a few of the other things that detectives had learned from the end of December until January 13th, the case was officially handed over to the homicide division. They assigned Detective Krasnoy as the lead investigator. He reached out to Christina and Trisha on January 15th. He learns from them that Fred's phone wasn't texting them anymore. They hadn't got text for a couple weeks at this point. He also learned when they're reaching out to Jeremy, because he is the one that said he saw Fred leave. He's living in the house. They don't get the feeling that Jeremy is worried about where Fred is. They also mention that every time they ask specific detailed questions, his story changes. One time he said that Fred had planned to go to a place called Paragon, Indiana. And then the next time he said somewhere else. Even the date that he left, all of it seemed not consistent.
When they searched their house, they didn't find Fred's phone and Fred's truck isn't there. They don't
Oh,
find any of that stuff.
good question. Fred's truck is there. The truck that he
Okay.
supposedly left to go hunting in. And not only that, Jeremy has been driving it and using it and still not making payments on it. As far as I know, did not find Fred's phone.
Okay. Were they
That's a
able
good
to pull the
question.
records and see where it was pinging from?
They do.
Okay.
This might surprise you or maybe not. Fred's phone never left Indianapolis. It was always in that West Indianapolis area. And on top of that, They pulled phone records not just for Fred, but for Jeremy as well. And their phones pinged in the same general area through most of November
Every
and
time.
December. That's a
Yeah.
pretty damning clue when you pull both of those. So that was really smart that they did that.
Yeah, for sure.
They continued to dig into Fred's bank accounts and credit cards and were really alarmed by the activity. Court records and reporting show that what investigators found was that Fred's bank account was indeed drained to zero, even negative, fully overdrawn. He also had about $5,000 racked up on his credit cards in just the few weeks after he went missing. They could see Fred rarely used his credit card. It wasn't his main way to pay for things. He just preferred to use his debit card and keep everything in checking. And he had never spent that much in a month before. They also found out that his bank profile, someone had logged in and changed the contact email and phone number on all of Fred's accounts to
Let me
Jeremy's.
guess.
hmm
Jeremy.
His own email and phone number. Huge red flag.
Yeah, it's not looking good for Jeremy.
Mm-mm. Everything that they find is strongly suggesting that Fred is not missing. Something happened and Jeremy is to blame. But aside from phone and financials, they don't have a lot else. They don't have evidence of a crime scene. They don't have witnesses to a crime. They haven't found Fred. And so they've got to keep building.
So by this point, it's written all over the walls that something happened to Fred, and Jeremy is looking very suspicious. But we haven't found Fred's body or any, like, there wasn't any blood in the house or anything like that.
No evidence of where Fred is or what happened. And it doesn't seem like they found forensics on that first warrant into his house.
Okay.
In late January 2020, detectives brought Jeremy in for some light questioning. They want to get a feel for his story, talk to him, find out what he knows. Initially, he doesn't want to talk about his dad. He spent time talking about his dad's roommate, saying he might have hurt Fred. But every time they try to ask him direct questions, especially about Fred, he changes the subject.
Did you say Fred's roommate?
Fred had had a roommate who had moved out when Jeremy had moved in, like a couple months after. I think the tension and having that many people in the house was just too much.
Oh, okay.
So he had found somewhere else to live. I
Okay.
didn't see his name anywhere. He's always in reporting just referred to as the roommate, even though he's not living there at the time.
Okay.
Good question. Eventually, they get him to start talking about the last time he saw Fred. He says now that it was November 8th between 2 and 3 p.m., which is not November 22nd. He said Fred was getting ready to go on this hunting trip. He had everything packed to head out. He specifically said that he took a maroon duffel bag and he saw Fred pack a crossbow, at least one long gun, and also a handgun. And then he also gives us some interesting information that detectives didn't know yet. He said, the two guys that my dad went hunting with, maybe you want to talk to them. They're named Brian and Dave. Didn't know their last name, just Brian and Dave. These two don't exist. It's completely made up. They're not friends. Nobody else has ever heard of friends of Fred's named Brian and Dave. I don't know where that came from. If you want to send them on a wild goose chase, I don't know.
That's
Uh,
interesting.
yeah. Now, throughout the whole interview and the conversation, Jeremy is claiming he doesn't know anything. He's told them everything. He also has a demeanor that Detective Krasnoy felt was odd. We do say you can't tell if someone is feeling any kind of way about something just by how they act, especially in a police interview. But Detective Krasnoy has been at this for a while and He really felt like there was some sort of odd way that Jeremy was acting about the whole thing. They let Jeremy head home. They did not get what they needed, but they also don't have evidence. They don't want to spook him. They don't want him to even know that he's on their radar or suspect at all at this point. They're continuing to look. They executed several search warrants throughout the spring and the summer. They also dug into that Lowe's receipt. Let me tell you what was on his shopping list. You ready?
Yeah.
Heavy duty cleaning wipes, bottles of Febreze air freshener, a 96-gallon wheeled trash can, germicidal bleach, a Duracell flashlight, latex gloves, extra large heavy duty plastic drop cloths, and Tide detergent pods.
So basically a murder cleanup kit.
Yep,
That's what that sounds
exactly.
like.
It is literally a checklist for covering up a crime.
Jeez.
Bleach, gloves, drop cloth, garbage
Garbage
can?
can.
Yeah.
They're like, where's
Now,
your garbage? Where's your 96-gallon garbage can? Because it's
lost
not
it.
here.
That's exactly right, actually. It's not there. So
Yeah.
where is it?
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, remember the list of things that Jeremy had said he took camping that Fred had taken with him? Detectives executed several more search warrants in the months that followed. Specifically, they wanted to find the things that he'd supposedly taken. Are they at the house or are they gone as well? Can we catch you in a lie here with this?
Well, and it should be back because his truck is back. So what was he saying about his truck being there?
Oh, he got a ride with someone else.
Oh, he went with somebody else. Okay.
He left that for me to drive. I'm paying for it after all, but
Kind of.
he got a ride. Yeah, exactly. Not really. And in those texts, he had said, I got my truck stuck in the mud,
Yeah.
specifically pointing. And he also said he packed up his truck and left.
Yeah.
So the changing story and the inconsistencies, he needs to write down his list of lies, I guess, because he literally cannot remember what he says day to day. So they're going through the house, they're looking for those things. They find the long shotgun, they find the handgun, they find the maroon duffel bag. They don't find the crossbow. And in Indiana, it's a law when you pawn something for record keeping, the pawn shop has to get your license information so that things you're selling can be traced back to whoever brought it in.
Yeah.
Detective Krasnoy goes through, he's looking at every pawn shop in the area. He finds one with a crossbow. And thankfully, it is still there. It feels like everything in this case almost that detectives get is working out, where in so many
Yeah.
others, you would never find the crossbow. You would never have surveillance footage. They're
Yeah.
really getting a lot of the information they need.
Yeah. That's good.
In digging into this crossbow, Jeremy is the one who had brought it in and pawned it. He can trace it to him. Detective Krasnoy, because he doesn't want tunnel vision. He doesn't want to think that it's Jeremy and they have all these things, but nothing that conclusively means that he's the one that did this.
Mm.
He's been talking to friends, other family, acquaintances, anybody they can find that knew Fred and could help them. Detectives found out that Fred had an issue with his shoulder. It was really hard for him to lift it over his head, and he really liked hunting with a crossbow. So his friend had changed the mechanism inside of it so that he didn't have to pull it back the same and hurt his shoulder. If you do that motion and you feel pulling it back, if it's really tough, probably couldn't have used it. His friend changed the mechanism to make it really easy to pull back. And I'm not sure of all the logistics in that, but the friend specifically told detectives when the crossbow comes from the manufacturer, it has a black mechanism in it. To switch it out, the piece that I found to fix it is bright silver. They don't look the same at all, but it's okay,
Uh,
it's inside.
Yeah,
But if you
very
take it apart,
recognizable.
yes, exactly. If you take it apart, you find that you know that's the one that I customized for Fred. They take it apart, it has the silver piece inside. So it is specifically the one that Fred would have taken hunting. They have got all of this evidence. They're slowly trying to build it. They need, if they can't find Fred's body, they need all of the evidence tied up in a nice, neat package because no body homicides are really hard to have a prosecutor agree to take it to trial. And
Yeah.
they have all this evidence. They have all the financial fraud, the pond crossbow, the phone kings, the Lowe's video, the fake text messages. Detectives are continuing to build this case. And even though they were trying not to have tunnel vision, every single thing points to Jeremy and no one else. So they're building this case. They really just want to make sure it's airtight, though, before they ask a prosecutor to take it to trial. They, in the process, also found out that witnesses had heard Jeremy telling people that he had killed his dad.
Oh,
According to legal documents later cited by the Washington Post, two people told police that Jeremy had bragged one night when they were out at a bar about shooting his father in the head, actually saying that he did it twice and that he had hidden his dad's body, possibly in a freezer. Can you imagine? He was allegedly telling acquaintances about killing his own father, which is beyond horrifying if true.
wow. That's unbelievable. Bragging about something that's so horrible. Did the police know all of that? That is so wild.
It looks like police continued to dig and work to find everything they could. Those witness accounts were part of the investigation by late 2020. If they had been able to find Fred or get a direct confession, I'm sure they would have moved quicker to arrest Jeremy, but they only get one chance at this and they didn't want to blow it. We still don't have a crime scene, a murder weapon, or a body, which makes it a really tough case. By early 2021, remember this all happened November 2019, so more than a year later. The Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department felt that they had collected enough evidence to move forward, even without having found Fred's body. They consulted with the Marion County Prosecutor's Office just to see if they would even be willing to take the case with everything they had so far. And thankfully, the decision was made to charge Jeremy Farmer with murder. On February 10th, 2021, now we're about 14 months after Fred vanished. Police went ahead and arrested 36-year-old Jeremy Farmer for the murder of his father. It was officially a homicide case now. The arrest made local news. The story was that his son was charged with killing his missing father, even though the father was still missing at that time. Fred's daughters, Trisha and Christina, were heartbroken but not completely surprised. By this point, they had helped point the investigation toward their brother with everything that they had found throughout the last year and especially in that first month. They later said it was unbelievable and, quote, sickening to accept that their own brother might have done this.
I can't even imagine that betrayal from their brother. That is so terrible and so sad.
So
And
sad.
and they still haven't even found Fred at this point, right?
Right. As of February 2021, Fred's body had not been found. And the family was in this awful limbo. They strongly suspected that Fred was dead. And now their brother, and for his mom, her son was accused of killing him. But they didn't have Fred back to properly mourn or lay to rest. Trisha and Christina said all they wanted was justice for dad. And deep down, they hoped that Jeremy would at least tell them what happened and where the body was. They even made public pleas, effectively saying, please just tell us what happened. tell us where he is. They also suspected that Jeremy did not act entirely alone.
Mm.
The sisters believed someone else might have helped Jeremy dispose of their father's body because it seems like a difficult task to do solo. And evidence suggested the body had been in the house for maybe quite some time before being moved. However, at that point, no accomplice had been identified publicly or really stated much more than we're looking for more information.
Oh, so interesting. Did they ever find out who helped him?
Nope. To this day, there's no record of anyone else being charged in this case. Trisha and Christina are left to wonder, did someone else play a role in this who hasn't been brought to justice and maybe who knew the exact scenario that happened or could have helped them have a fuller understanding before all the way into 2021? And it could be that Jeremy had a friend help or somehow managed on his own. If someone did assist, though, they've never been publicly named. And Jeremy himself hasn't implicated anyone else to this day, as far as we know. We have Jeremy in custody awaiting trial for murder. And like we talked about, charging someone with murder without a body is bold, but it's not unprecedented. And there's actually research that shows those cases have a higher conviction rate simply because to take them to trial in the first place, you have to have so much evidence without
Oh,
the
interesting.
body. And
Yeah.
prosecutors were confident in the evidence that they had, and the case was compelling. There's that saying, no body, no crime. But that's not legally true if you can prove homicide through circumstantial evidence. Still, like we said, harder to take that case to trial. The family, investigators, prosecutors, they all really wanted to find Fred's remains, both for the sake of the case, but also for the family's closure.
Yeah, that is so hard for the daughters and the rest of the family not having their father's body, knowing where he is, what happened. Like you said before, just to properly mourn and lay him to rest and have that
Mhm.
closure. And knowing the trial was eventually coming up, they probably feared that they might say he's just missing and not dead, right?
Exactly. Around that time, local media even talked about how tough it is to prove murder without a body and how the defense could absolutely try to raise that doubt. Where's the proof that he's dead? Even though rationally, Fred would never stay away this long or let his son drain his bank accounts and run up debt in his name. So months go by, and Jeremy is in jail through the rest of 2021. The family is waiting and they're still hoping for some kind of development. And then finally, that comes in May. May 2021, roughly 18 months since Fred was last seen. Police get a call from a storage facility in Brownsburg, Indiana, which is a suburban area just outside Indianapolis. The facility is called Ameristore Self Storage. An employee there reported a bad smell coming from one of those storage units. The smell was so bad and so distinct that the people who worked there knew something was wrong. They even suspected that it might be a decomposing body. They called police.
Oh, wow. So this storage unit must have been connected to the case, they believe.
Yes. And this is where some of these pieces click together. When police arrived and checked the records for the storage unit, they found that it had been rented by none other than Jeremy Farmer. Now, I believe that the storage unit had also checked that and had seen his name in the news and probably called police quicker than they might have, knowing he's in prison awaiting a murder trial. And now there's smell coming from the storage unit he rented. Back in November of 2019, in fact, is when he rented this unit.
Oh, that's not good.
No,
Back when they first started looking into Jeremy, did they know that he had a storage unit?
they didn't actually. He had rented it with a credit card that police didn't know he had and hadn't seen in the financial records. and then he was paying cash. Jeremy continued paying cash on the storage unit up until he was arrested in February 2021. And then he couldn't keep making the payments. And actually, the company had repossessed it around the beginning of May. It wasn't even really his anymore because he hadn't made multiple payments on this. Unit fees had been unpaid for a few months. Then they noticed the smell and they don't want to go look in there. They would like police to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Inside, police discovered quite a bunch.
Oh, what did they find? Does not
Well,
sound good.
remember his whole shopping list from Lowe's? They basically found all of that. So when they opened it up, they found this large 96-gallon trash bin, the same one. There was actually still a sticker on the side of it, and they were able to compare it to the receipt they had found, and it was the one that he had purchased from Lowe's. And this is all happening on May 13th, 3 months after he's been arrested. They get to this trash bin. The lid is secured with a bunch of zip ties around the top. They cut those off. They open the lid. There is trash on the top of it. They pull it out. They're cataloging every single piece of it as evidence. As they go through that, they get through it and they found Fred at the bottom of this trash bin.
Oh, so
Mm,
sad.
so sad. He was covered with a tarp. The body was found wrapped in a sleeping bag and it was in an advanced state of decomp, but nowhere near what it would have been if he had been, say, left in the elements or somewhere else. He was essentially in this cool, dark, contained space that made it so they could actually get a lot of evidence. It's interesting. Do you remember how he bought all of those air fresheners? He had been continuing to buy them. He had ones that let out a puff of smell every 15 minutes or so. And that had really masked the smell up until he stopped being able to go do that. So the combination of how long had passed and also he wasn't able to do the air fresheners anymore is really the only reason that they started to get that smell and call it in. When an autopsy was done on Fred, they determined that he had died from a gunshot wound to the head. And officially now the death was ruled a homicide. The forensic pathologist noted that the bullet's trajectory went straight into the front of Fred's skull and toward the back with no upward or downward deviation. This suggests the shot was fired either point blank in front of him or directly down into him, like if he was laying on the ground, but certainly not consistent with any kind of accidental struggle.
That is so sad. But at least now the family has confirmation and can bring him home. What did his daughter say?
Fred's family was devastated, but they were relieved to finally have answers. It's agonizing that for 18 months they really probably wanted to tell themselves that Fred was just missing and not gone. The family put out a statement thanking everyone for all of their support over the last 18 months, saying that they were extremely relieved that their father had been found and identified. They called this the beginning of a new chapter of processing what happened and asked for privacy as they mourned. In late May 2021, just days after the discovery, they organized a celebration of life for Fred. It was held on May 22nd, 2021, at a local funeral home in Speedway, which is a suburb of Indy. And it was open to friends and to the public. Finally, they could lay Fred to rest properly. From an investigative standpoint, finding the body was huge. It not only gave the family closure, but it also provided crucial evidence for the case against Jeremy. Up to that point, the prosecution was preparing for trial without a body. Now they had direct forensic evidence of murder.
And Jeremy was already in jail at this time, so he couldn't do anything about that storage unit, right?
Exactly. Jeremy had been in jail. He hadn't been able to get out on bond or anything since his arrest in February of 2021. So he hadn't been tending to the storage unit. He hadn't been paying for it, hadn't been able to keep up on his air fresheners. I suspect that he never expected the body to be found. I mean, when he was free without being arrested for this, I think he thought he could hide it indefinitely.
Okay. That's so
I know.
wild to me that he would think that he could just hide a body in a storage unit forever.
Yes, exactly. And he probably thought that same thing, no body, no crime, but you've got every other piece of this puzzle. And prosecutors did a great job collecting evidence and putting this whole case together. With Fred's body recovered and identified, the wheels of justice turned slowly but surely. It took some time for the case to go to trial, partly due to backlogs. Also, we're in COVID still in 2021. And perhaps Jeremy's defense preparations. They always like to push that trial back and back. Eventually, in April 2023, over 3 years after Fred's death, Jeremy had his day in court. The trial took place in Indianapolis. It only lasted 3 days, which is really short for a murder trial. That's often a
Yeah.
sign that the evidence is straightforward.
Yeah. That is so crazy. Did he maintain that he was innocent or did he try to explain what happened?
Jeremy did not plead guilty. In fact, he took the witness stand in his own defense, which is really uncommon in murder trials. Defendants often choose not to testify. Jeremy's story, as revealed in the court docs, was that he claimed it was self defense.
Oh, okay.
Here's what he told the jury. It's quite something. Jeremy testified that on the night of November 21st, 2019, around when Fred went missing, he said that Fred came home after drinking and was drunk, and they got into a confrontation about the truck payments. Jeremy said Fred was angry and threatened to take away the truck because Jeremy hadn't been paying for it. According to him, he responded by threatening to expose his father's, quote, supposed secrets. And this is awful. Specifically, Jeremy claimed that he told his dad, if you take the truck, I'll report you for selling drugs. Jeremy was basically alleging that his father was involved in drug smuggling or sales and that he knew about it. And there is no evidence that Fred was involved in any such thing, by the way. At that point, Jeremy said Fred became enraged. He claimed Fred pulled out a handgun and pointed it at Jeremy's head, threatening to kill him. Now, Fred did have that injured shoulder and limited arm mobility. And Jeremy did acknowledge in his testimony that Fred struggled to hold the gun straight because of his shoulder. Jeremy said he tried to wrestle the gun away by grabbing his father's arm. And during the struggle, the gun, quote, just went off while Fred was holding it. In Jeremy's version of accounts, the shooting was an accident that happened as he was defending himself from his father, who was drunk and armed.
Interesting. That sounds like a very convenient story.
Mhm.
Did the evidence support this at all? Like self defense, what they found in the autopsy, did it support that at all?
No, it didn't. The evidence did not support that, especially like we talked about. The shot to his head was straight on. Prosecutors, to rebuttal that story, brought in the forensic experts who pointed out several problems with Jeremy's account. First, Fred's autopsy showed no signs of any physical altercation, no bruises, cuts, or scrapes on his body, just the fatal gunshot wound. If there had been a hand to hand struggle for a gun, you'd expect to see some bruising or injuries on Fred from this fight, and there were none. Second, the toxicology report showed no alcohol in Fred's system. Jeremy claimed that his dad was drunk that night, but Toxicology says otherwise, which that point alone seriously undercut Jeremy's credibility.
I always wonder too, when something happens like an accident that is self defense, why did you go and buy all the things to try and cover it up and hide it in a storage unit for 18 months? Like, why didn't you call the
And
police?
yes,
I
exactly.
never understand that. If it truly is self defense and you're not at fault, why didn't you leave the scene and call the police and tell them what happened right away?
Right. And you pretended to be him for
Yeah,
2
a long
months
time.
almost. Yeah. And made up a story about where he went.
And
Like you
you
said, the
ripped up your
storage unit.
carpet. You went and bought
Yes.
$300 worth of stuff, and then you stole his
Mhm.
card and went bar hopping. It just doesn't make any
Yes.
sense.
Yes. All of your actions after this also do not support your self-defense claim.
Yes, if it truly is self defense and it's not your fault, call the police. Don't
Mhm.
hide the body in a storage unit and take over his life for 2 months.
Right. Exactly. That really, I believe, is the biggest piece that makes his story seem absolutely made up. They also brought in the forensic pathologist who talked to the jury about the bullet trajectory. He testified that for the bullet to have no upward or downward angle, the gun was likely fired by someone standing directly in front of Fred or directly above him, shooting down. So the story that the gun went off while they were fighting, but Fred was holding it, that doesn't make any sense. It would have not had that exact path, and it wouldn't be so cleanly straight on. Then you think about Fred's shoulder problems.
Mhm.
How would he have been holding it? Try to hold it that way. It doesn't even make sense.
And
It's
if you know you have a loaded gun and you're fighting with someone, either he's taking it and aiming it at you, or why would it
mhm,
doesn't make any sense. And if he's holding it, I don't feel like you could get that straight on angle. That would be really difficult.
really difficult without any upward or downward. So clean and straight. Even if you were to believe that struggle story, it's exactly what Lara said. If it is self defense, he didn't call 911, he didn't get help. Jeremy did the opposite. He admitted in court that after the gun went off and his father fell, he fled the house without calling for any medical help. He said he came back a few days later and found his father dead and then decided to hide the body. He did confess that he had put his dad's body into that trash bin and hauled it to the storage unit, cleaning up the scene, tearing out the carpet, using all the cleaning supplies. He also admitted to the subsequent cover up actions like sending the texts, using the credit cards. And he said he did all of this because, as he put it, he didn't think anyone would believe his self defense claim. Fair, fair, because the evidence doesn't show that.
Yeah. Especially no one's going to believe it once you hide it all.
Exactly. Now, if you remember, the date on that Lowe's receipt was November 18th. He says this all happened on November 21st. So you bought all of that 3 days before this happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes no sense. That makes it even worse.
Yes. If you're going to lie about the self defense and then coming back days later and covering it up, why'd you buy all the stuff to cover it up 3 days before you're claiming it happened when you could say it happened any day?
Yeah.
You could have said it happened November 7th. I mean,
Well, and he's the one who had said that he last saw him on November 22nd,
right. But he bought all the stuff on November 18th.
on November 18th. Yep.
Wild.
Yeah.
The law in Indiana is that if you claim self defense, the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it wasn't self defense. And the prosecutors worked to do that by pointing out all of the contradictions. And in the end, the jury clearly didn't buy Jeremy's self defense story. After the jury deliberated, they found Jeremy Farmer guilty of the murder of his father, Roger Fred Farmer. The verdict came down in early April 2023. On April 28th, 2023, the judge sentenced Jeremy. He received 57 years in prison for the murder. Given that Jeremy was in his mid 30s at the time, 57 years is essentially the bulk of his life behind bars. Indiana does allow for possible parole after a percentage of the sentence, but he's looking at spending decades in prison. As of now, Jeremy is in the Indiana Department of Correction.
Wow. Did he show any remorse or say anything after sentencing to his sisters or family?
There's no public indication that he apologized or admitted guilt at sentencing. He continued to maintain it was self defense throughout his trial, and he appealed his conviction on those grounds. But an appellate court just recently upheld his conviction, finding the evidence against his self defense claim overwhelming. For the family, they have given statements about how this shattered them. Trisha said her heart hurt for her mother and her grandmother because this tragedy ripped the family apart. They lost their father and essentially they lost their brother in one fell swoop. It's so awful, so tragic.
So tragic. That really terrible.
Yeah. And that is the case of Roger Fred Farmer, which started as a missing person case and ended as a solved murder with the victim's son behind bars. This case stands out for how the family's intuition played such a key role. Fred's daughters knew something was wrong simply by those text messages. They pushed for the investigation, they looked at bank records, and they replayed every suspicious detail to detectives. In a way, they were absolutely instrumental in solving their father's disappearance. I mean, without their persistence, noticing those emoji punctuated texts and then the emptied bank accounts, who knows how long it would have taken to realize that a crime had even occurred.
Yeah. That's so heartbreaking. And they helped crack the case, had to face their truth that it was their own brother. Like, that is so horrible. But I'm glad that they got justice for their dad.
Absolutely. And credit to the Indianapolis Metro Police as well. Detective Krasnoy and his team methodically and patiently gathered evidence, even with no body initially. They didn't give up. And when the time was right, they were able to arrest Jeremy. And because they were able to arrest him, that led to the discovery of Fred's body. This case really shows how sometimes the killer is someone you'd never want to suspect. And it shows how greed or desperation, like financial issues, can lead to these truly heinous acts. Jeremy basically killed his father, it appears, over money and a truck, and then tried to profit off of it by draining his accounts, which is horrifying.
So horrifying. And I feel so bad for their whole family, especially being their own brother. That still is wild to me. I hope
Mhm.
that they can heal at least. I'm glad that they were able to find the body and get some answers. And hopefully, knowing the truth, they can honor his memory.
Yeah, I agree. From what we know, they've leaned on each other and their community. It's clear Fred was loved deeply by his daughters and those who knew him. And the daughters showed incredible strength. Imagine coordinating with police to investigate your own brother. That is just tragic all
Yeah.
around. But
Yeah.
in the end, they were able to get justice for their dad. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Crime Clueless. We are always grateful when you spend your time with us. If you want to see the resources that we use to create this episode or to learn more about this case, you can visit our blog on our website, crimeclueless.com. We would love to have you join us on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube at Crime Clueless on all of those. We would be so grateful if you have a minute. A fast, free, easy way to help out Crime Clueless is to give us a rating or a review on whichever platform you listen on. We are grateful for all of those, and they truly do help the podcast. And as always, Remember, refuse to be clueless, careless, or caught up.
Not today, murders.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.